653 BC, Ashurbanipal, the emperor, his brother, is the king of Babylon. And he calls his brother Ashurbanipal, and he says, the Elamites are back. Can you get them out of here? Can you chase them back to their capital city? Ashurbanipal says, you got it. He crushes the Elamite army and installs the sons of Urtak as co-kings in Elam. So this is what they call a pro-gamer move. He has rival kings in the same kingdom who are both loyal to him. Pretty smart. In 652, Ashurbanipal's brother, Shuma-shun-ukim, the one who just asked his brother to chase the Elamites out of Babylon, gets an attitude and revolts at the head of a coalition of other vassal states. Judah kept their wits about them and didn't join the coalition. That's in 652. In 648, after a years-long siege of Babylon, Shama-shun-ukim is killed in some terrible but undescribed way, because remember, he's still the king's brother, so he has to suffer for revolting, but they can't tell you how he suffered because he is of royal blood. But the Assyrian records say it was horrible, and they leave it at that, which is uncharacteristically uncolorful for Assyrian records. You know it's horrible, but also they describe in detail in many other places, bringing in their wives and their children of the man to be executed, and the king setting up his throne in front of the man to be executed with his concubines for a nice week of skinning him alive. So they just left it at Shama-shun-ukim suffered. In 647 BC, in a campaign to once again root out the Chaldean rebels harbored in Elam, Assyria invades their neighbor, which has recently had a series of leadership changes. In 646 BC, deciding that Elam had been a problem for too long, Ashurbanipal leveled every major city of Elam, killed most of the population, and enslaved the rest. This genocide was effective in ending the Elamite civilization. King Cyrus of Parsua, now on Assyria's frontier, so, now that Assyria... I hit the power button.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Give it a minute, yeah.
Parsua is now on Assyria's frontier because Assyria has now expanded their borders to the borders of Elam. This King Cyrus of Parsua begins paying tribute to Ashurbanipal after the buffer state of Elam ceases to exist. Parsua was such a backwater that we don't have any clear records from them. No records from Parsua exist. We only know of them from third parties like Babylon and Assyria. However, a lot of major historians, I don't want to say most, but a lot of modern major historians believe that this new border kingdom of Parsua was actually a fledgling Persia. And their king Cyrus was actually Cyrus I, who is Cyrus the Great's grandfather. And we know Cyrus I was the king of Persia around this time from Persian records that would come later. We just don't know that Cyrus is the same Cyrus and Parsua is the same Persia. But a strong case exists.
This is up, yeah.
Man, I really want to have images. I'm gonna... Oh.
Something just
That's
missed
it.
back.
You got it.
Okay. So,
Now you got something different.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I think, Wikipedia sometimes really comes through with a great description. So, up top here, we have Wikipedia's description of what happened to Elam, and down below, we have Ashurbanipal's description, and then on the left, we have a nice picture. So, I'm just going to read from Wikipedia here.
Good.
On their way back from their campaign in Elam, the Assyrian forces brutally plundered Susa, the capital city. In Ashurbanipal's triumphant inscriptions detailing the sack, it is described in great detail, recounting how the Assyrians desecrated the royal tombs, looted and razed temples, stole the statues of the Elamite gods, and sowed salt in the ground. The ancient Elamite capital was wiped off the face of the earth, and Ashurbanipal then continued with the destruction of Elamite settlements on a massive scale. In addition to the destruction of numerous cities, thousands of those Elamites who were not killed were deported away from their homeland. Ashurbanipal's brutal suppression of Elam is sometimes considered a genocide. The detail and length of Ashurbanipal's inscriptions concerning the destruction suggests that the events were meant to shock the world, signaling the defeat and eradication of the Elamites as a distinct cultural entity. Ashurbanipal has this to say about it. Susa, the great holy city, abode of their gods, seat of their mysteries, I conquered, according to the word of Ashur and Ishtar. I entered its palaces, I dwelt there in rejoicing. I opened the treasures where silver and gold, goods and wealth were amassed, the treasures of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon that the ancient kings of Elam had looted and carried away. I destroyed the ziggurat of Susa. I smashed its shining copper horns. In Shushanat, god of the oracles, who resides in secret places, where no man sees his divine nature, along with the gods that surround him, with their jewelry, their wealth, their furniture, with their priests, I brought as booty to the land of Asher. I reduced the temples of Elam to naught, their gods, their goddesses, I scattered to the winds. The secret groves where no outsider had ever penetrated, where no layman had ever trod, my soldiers entered. They saw their mysteries. They destroyed them by fire. The tombs of their ancient and recent kings who had not feared the goddess Ishtar, my lady, and who were the cause of torments to the kings, my fathers, those tombs I devastated, I destroyed, I exposed to the sun, and I carried away their bones toward the land of Asher. I devastated the provinces of Elam, and on their lands I spread salt.
Complete genocide.
You'll never hear about Elam after this.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist.
They're just gone.
And no one tried to rebuild them, unlike Babylon. So Elam doesn't exist anymore. Elam's gone.
Lights out.
Yes, lights out. Interestingly, after this happened, this was 646 BC, the availability of Assyrian records declined sharply from here on out, clearly suggesting that the Assyrian Empire went into some sort of decline as an empire. Probably because everyone hated them, for obvious reasons.
The way that podcast described it is they got so big. Then when you have the revolts that happen over here, and you send the folks over here to deal with that, then on the other side you've got like an opportunity for a revolt without the resistance.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And when everyone hates you because you're deleting civilizations. So, in 2 Kings 22, verses 1 and 2, Josiah will take the throne of Judah. And I'll just read it really quickly here. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidiah, the daughter of Adiah of Boskath. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the ways of David and his father, and turned not aside from the right hand or the left. So Josiah takes over. He's a good king. That's 641 BC. 639 BC, nothing happens per se in 639 BC, but it's an interesting year because only 2 official records of Ashurbanipal exist after 639 BC. In 631 BC, sometime between 631 and 627 BC, it's unclear because, again, the records, they're just not there, but between 631 BC and 627 BC, Ashurbanipal is deposed, abdicates, or dies at some point. The Assyrian records make it sound like this happened let me see if I've got this right. I forgot to write it down. The Assyrian records make it seem like Ashurbanipal dies in 631. Modern historians and what other evidence exists from other civilizations and just the way the timelines work out think it's more like 627. 631, 627. Somewhere in there, Ashurbanipal stops being king for a reason. Unclear when or what or why exactly. But what is clear is that by 627, Shin-Sharishkun is the new Assyrian emperor. And he's facing a revolt from Babylon. And Nabopolassar, the king of the Chaldeans at that time, and Shin-Sharishkun is just having a hell of a time with it. In 626, after consolidating power in Babylon, Nabopolassar invades the Assyrian heartland. And in 615, Cyaxares, the Median king, and the Medes were people that lived, well, there, they're on the map. So remember, Elam is gone.
Yeah.
So this is now Assyria. Chaldeans, Babylonians. So the Medes and the Chaldeans, they get together to invade the Assyrian heartland. In 615 BC is when the Medes get going. So 626, Babylon's been causing problems for 11 years. 615, Cyaxares, the Median king, allies with the Babylonians against Assyria. In 612 BC, Nineveh falls and Shin-Sharishkun is killed. The new king, Ashur-uballit II, moves his throne to Haran. The Babylonians were a little bit more matter-of-fact than the Assyrians. So, basically we get told in Babylonian records that the Assyrian army met the Babylonian army, they lost. The city was taken and the people driven out. And they're not a lot more colorful than that. But this is a famous painting by an artist named John Martin of what it may have looked like as the city of Nineveh was destroyed. Andy, Dad, y'all listen to the podcast, but I'll mention for those who didn't. So this is 612 BC. In about 400-ish BC, Xenophon, a Greek mercenary who's been hired to fight in a Persian civil war, his side loses, and now he's got to get back to Greece after he's been in a Persian civil war. And at one point, his men, they camp outside the walls of Nineveh, this towering city. It's unlike any city he's ever seen, and it's a ghost town. And he asks the locals what it is, and they have no idea.
Which is 200 years after this.
200 years after this 2,000-year empire. No one even knows what it is. And the city's still there, but they won't enter it. They don't know why. So we don't know exactly how Nineveh was treated, but you can imagine it wasn't pleasant.
Again, your podcast referencing that, it's according to Dan Carlin, it's so significant, the fall of Nineveh, that after that is considered modern history almost. Even though it's a little bit BC, it's more than 2,000 years ago, but whatever took place there was so dramatic that it's so historical that most historians consider that the beginning of our modern world.
Yes, that's true. The other thing, Dan Carlin likes his example, and Paul and David, y'all will definitely like this. Nathan, if you've seen the movie, you'll like this. But Dan Carlin compares Xenophon seeing the ruins of Nineveh 200 years later and no one knowing what it is or what happened or how it got there. He compares it to the end of Planet of the Apes when they see the Statue of Liberty in the sand. Yeah. Dan Carlin says the ruins of Nineveh are that Statue of Liberty in the sand.
Charlton Heston screaming at the Statue of Liberty. What does he say? You did it. You did it, or something. Whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Something. He compares it to that scene.
Wow. Yeah, well, look at it. That's. I mean, I know that's an artist rendition, but I'm sure it was probably worse than that.
Just the description of the walls was so hard to.
With 50-foot foundations, with 20-foot walls on top of them, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were the dominant civilization of the world for 2,000 years.
We're only 200 years.
And in a 15-year rebellion, their civilization is eliminated. Yeah. They had ended multiple civilizations in the century before. Theirs disappeared. So, again, the Babylonians weren't quite as colorful, so we don't know exactly how they ended that civilization, but...
We stopped them and that's it.
There's no more Assyrians. That's all. That's 612 BC. In 610 BC, the new Assyrian king, Ashur-uballit II, he's moved his capital to Haran. in 610 BC, the Medo-Babylonian coalition takes the new capital city of Haran, and Ashur-uballit II does escape and goes basically running south to Egypt to meet up with his Egyptian allies, because remember, the pharaoh Sopnik I, who had been installed way back by Esarhaddon, is a loyal ally. At this point, he's operating pretty independently, and clearly the Assyrian Empire is in decline. So at this point, the Egyptian Empire is independent in all but name, but they still come running, just like a good ally would do. Except on the way, the pharaoh Sopnik I dies of natural causes on the way to meet with the Babylonians, or with the Assyrians, excuse me. But he raised his son Necho II, or Necho II. He raised his son Necho II to be a big Assyria guy as well. And so Necho II personally takes the command of his army and continues his march to the aid of his Assyrian ally to face the Babylonians. And we have two accounts in the Bible that kind of disagree with each other as to what happens as the Egyptian army passes through Judah. Josiah, sensing now's our chance to finally get out from under their thumb, takes his army out to meet the Egyptian army and basically tell them, nope, the Babylonians are kicking their butts up there and you're not going to help them. It goes about as well as you imagine. But in 2 Kings chapter 23, verses 29 and 30, we have an account here, as well as 2 Chronicles chapter 35, verses 20 and 24. So if two people want to get those two up and ready to go, we can...
2 Chronicles 35.
2 Chronicles 35 and 2 Kings 23. We can read either one first.
35 what?
20 and 20 through 24.
All right, 2 Chronicles 35:20. After all this, when Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Charchemish by Euphrates, and Josiah went out against him. But he sent ambassadors to him, saying, What have I to do with thee, thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war, for God commanded me to take haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God, who is with me, that he destroy thee not. Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself that he might fight with him, and hearkened not unto the words of Necho from the mouth of God, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. And the archers shot at King Josiah, and the king said to the servants, Have me away, for I am sore wounded. His servants therefore took him out of that chariot and put him in the second chariot that he had, and they brought him to Jerusalem. And he died and was buried in one of the sepulchres of his father, and all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for Josiah.
Okay, thank you. And then somebody want to read...
I'll do Kings 29:30.
Okay.
In his days, Pharaoh Necho, I can't figure out.
Pharaoh Necho.
Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. And King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. And his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Doesn't that Megiddo come back up later in Revelation? Okay.
It does. It does.
We'll get there.
A lot of what we've talked about today comes back up later in Revelation, but not before it comes up in Daniel.
Okay, good.
Which is why we've done all of this. And I know it's taken a
good
while.
by
But,
itself, but you tie it into other things, it's even better.
So yeah, a lot of like Megiddo and the remnant and the delivering into the well, actually, we're going to get to the delivering into the hands today, but
The names of their gods becoming the names of the people. That's a big time.
but a lot of this won't even tie in until we get back to Revelation. So,
Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha. I wanted to read both of those verses because there's a really big disagreement between those two verses. There's a huge contradiction. Is Pharaoh coming against the Assyrian army or against the Babylonians with the Assyrian army? Again, Bible, not always the best history book. But historical records show that the Assyrian king was coming to meet with his ally, or the Egyptian king, excuse me. The Pharaoh was coming to meet his ally, the Assyrian king, to fight the Babylonians. I choose to believe that coming against the Assyrian king was a translation error, and what they meant was they were going to put their armies side by side, not mix them all together. But that's just me making it make sense. So I like the Second Chronicles version of the story.
Yeah, I was going to say the Second Kings
reason.
version is the one that says they went against.
And the other reason I like the Second Chronicles version is because it shows that when Josiah goes out to fight the Egyptians, and the Egyptian king says, "Dude, I'm not here for you. Well, you leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. I don't want to." And Josiah says, "No, I'll be fighting," and he gets killed. But it's significant that the Egyptian king wasn't really there for Judah, because after he kills the king of Judah, he says, "Look, pick your own king. I don't care. Just leave me alone. Let me go. Come on, Jewish people. Let my people go." In a weird role reversal. So the Egyptians move on, and Judah seats Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah. Interestingly, the younger son of Josiah. Judah chooses to sit on the throne. The Pharaoh meets up with the Assyrian king. They fail to retake Haran, and Necho II marches back to Egypt defeated. This is the point at which Ashur-uballit II and Assyria just disappear from the historical record. We don't know what happened to Ashur-uballit. He lost. That's all that happened. That's it. No one else hears of Assyria after this point. This is the nail in the coffin for them. Nineveh has fallen. They've lost at Haran. Assyria is kaput. On his way back through Judah, Necho stops by Jerusalem, see how things are going, see if everything's cool, and can't believe that they put Jehoahaz on the throne, who, for some reason, Necho just not a fan of him, and Necho says, "All right, look, I tried to be a nice guy, and y'all put this guy in charge, and y'all know I don't like him, so get him out of here. We're going to make his older brother, who should have been king anyway, we're going to make his older brother Jehoiakim the king." And that is all in the year 609 BC. So, 609 BC, the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II seats Jehoiakim on the throne of Judah in Jerusalem. In 609 BC. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, which part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. In 605 BC. And now we're reading Daniel.
So we finally bumping into Daniel.
So Nebuchadnezzar, obviously a different name than Nabopolassar. So Nebuchadnezzar, he was actually Nebuchadnezzar II, took over from his father Nabopolassar sometime during that conquest, probably right around the time that Assyria disappears all the way in 609. In 606, they're still on cleanup because they've just taken up the preeminent empire of the world. So after 3 years, the Babylonians, who are conquering their former masters, the Assyrians, finally get to Judah, and they're like, all right, well, who's in charge now. And Jehoiakim says, well, the Egyptians are in charge. And the Babylonians say, no, they're not. Your city's under siege. After being put under siege, part of the vessels of the house of God, so they put the city under siege. Jehoiakim, it's unclear in Daniel what happened, but Jehoiakim surrenders after being under siege for a while. Jehoiakim does surrender, and they basically say, you can surrender, but what you're going to have to do is give us vessels from the house of your God. So give us holy artifacts and wealthy artifacts, and we will put your God next to our gods in our temple with our idols. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
You slid right on into Daniel 1 without me even noticing.
So, and we've been through now Daniel 1 through 6. So, I went through all of that to set the political stage of what's going on and what this means. When Nebuchadnezzar sends his master of eunuchs to the royal court of Judah to adopt some kids, they're not being adopted. They're hostages who are being taken to Babylon to be raised as Babylonians, so that it's a lose-lose for Judah. Judah revolts, we kill your kids. Judah doesn't revolt, you die of natural causes, we put your kids in charge. And by the way, they're Babylonians now. And I wanted to go through the whole history of the region to get the flavor of how things are done and to understand what the wider context of the who's and the what's and the where's and the why's and the how's. We had a preliminary discussion on Daniel last week, and I think in our talking about it was kind of unclear of like, where'd Babylon come from? Why are they taking these kids? Are they being nice to the kids or mean to the kids? What's up? Why is Nebuchadnezzar asking for Judah's kids? Why are they getting new names? Well, that's a little bit, we didn't read that part yet. But what's going on? So I wanted to go through all of this and see the rise and fall of these civilizations and just how things are done, so that understanding we're dealing with the civilization that just erased from history a civilization that 50 years ago erased multiple civilizations from history. They're not taking these kids in to be nice. Nothing good is about to happen to Daniel and Ananiah and Mishael and Azariah. They are hostages, they are prisoners, they are political weapons. And that is the role and that is the story that we are about to read. So, with that, I've read the first 6 verses. Does anyone want to pick up in Daniel 1 verse 7? And was this helpful, or did I just waste everyone's time?
No, that's awesome.
That was
Okay.
great. Awesome. Yeah. You definitely laid the groundwork. I'm glad I heard that podcast, but you explained it way more in detail, so thank you.
You know, what you've taught tonight lets us know why.
I felt like the history lesson was important because otherwise, these are just names in a book.
Yep, that's good.
I'll pick up and read a little bit here. I'll start in 7. So he just mentioned the names in 6, and names are going to become important. Daniel 7. So Daniel's like right past the halfway point. Go to the middle, and go a little bit to the right.
Daniel, where,
Daniel 1,
Daniel 1.
verse 7. Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah. We always said Abednego, but it's more Abednego. So I'll try to pronounce it properly.
And all of those names, as we saw in some of the history, it was. Can we like turn the AC back on?
Yeah, I turned it off to save your voice because you have to talk over it. It is getting.
As we saw earlier, it was custom among the Assyrians and the Babylonians to name royalty after their deities. You know, Marduk Baladan, Marduk the chief god, Ashur Banipal, Ashur the chief god. So these are princes, so they're being named after second-rate deities. And Belteshazzar and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego are all Babylonian deities. So
I remember
they're
a while back somebody talked about. I can't remember if it was somebody who talked about it here, if it's something that goes back for years. But somebody was trying to explain some of these. That Mishael, that El is usually a name of deity, so that he was already named after his god El, the god we worship, El Shaddai. So that's
interesting.
So his name became Meshach, and what they pointed out was that name Shak is a female god that is even worshipped still today sometime. And I don't know if any of you read the book or saw the movie, The Shack. It's literally the female god, and God is described as a female in that book.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then the next name, I can't remember all the details now. But anyway, it was interesting to hear how those names definitely related to gods of the Babylonian people. Okay, I'll go ahead and read a little more. I'll start in 8. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord, the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endangered my head to the king. So in other words, what he's saying is, if you don't eat and get fattened up like the other people who are going to get fattened up, I might lose my head because the king's going to know I'm not making you eat the good stuff. So that's what that little conversation is about.
Well, actually, not only if you aren't fattened up like the others who are going to get fattened up, but the opposite. If you are frail and thin and skinny, like your people back home, that's not going to be good for me.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't look fresh and fattened
not
up,
if you don't look like the king's kids, but if you look like what the king is making your kids look like.
Oh yeah.
So it's the
right.
So it's a little picture of what's going on in Jerusalem. They're not having a great time.
Yeah. But these particular kids, like you say, they're trying to adopt, so they have to integrate them in. So they have to start eating a certain way and look a certain way and all that. So. And Daniel's sensitive to it. So here's how he answers. He says, Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel. I guess here we go with the traditional Hebrew names. Hananiah, Mishael, and Ezra. Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. So I remember someone describing pulse was like porridge or beans or
Yeah, it's
something.
a
Really,
vegetarian.
so you know what it is. Yeah.
Vegetarian diet with beans and legumes.
Yeah.
And, things that, well, just vegan or vegetarian.
Yeah. So he was definitely not going to be eating the meat and drinking the wine. He said, I'll eat pulse and water. He said, give me 10 days, then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants.
And I want to cut in here,
Yeah.
just especially when we read about it a lot in Romans, about, oh, if your meat offends, you can eat the meat or don't eat the meat, whatever, it doesn't matter. The meat, whatever, who cares? Very clearly here, Daniel is very acutely aware that he cannot eat meat that has not been prepared or, God forbid, has been given or sacrificed in
to
some
another
way
god.
for
Yeah.
another God. So again, to tie the theme of overall of what we do in this Bible study, Paul talking about meat in Romans, here is a direct example that surely Christians that were Paul's contemporaries would point to and say, look at this, the meat matters. And anyway, just to...
Yeah, Paul rebukes that and says the meat doesn't matter. In fact, if the meat is going to matter to your brother, then eat it or don't eat it based on whatever he wants you to do. Paul goes on to say that. That's how little it matters now in this dispensation. We're no longer under that law. But yeah, at this point in time, Daniel was clearly under the law of God, and you could not eat meat offered to other idols. Or like you say, not prepared in the proper way. So he said, give me 10 days. So where are we? Then look upon our countenances. So he consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for those 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, and then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar, and the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Israel. Therefore stood they before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus.
In 602 BC. So,
What are you going to say? Yeah.
So interesting here at the end that, and this will set up the rest of what's going on, obviously in Daniel, that the king found them in all matters of wisdom and understanding 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. So you got to remember in this time, trust the science. You know, that's the phrase that gets thrown around a lot today for various political things. Trust the magicians is the Babylonian version of trust the science. And the king is recognizing now that Daniel is the guy. So Daniel just basically became the new Fauci in the Babylonian kingdom. So that will set up the rest of the book. As will, it's important that it's mentioned here, the first year of King Cyrus. And this is after 3 years, so this would be about 602 BC where we're ending today.
Wow. You gave the presentation. I need to take a breath.
It was really